Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. As a newly minted doctor of photographic surgery, we're going to continue from the last video. I'll link to that below, but just in case you're not aware, the last video was the overall concept and general build progress of the D-TLR. We have progressed a bit since then, so this is following up from that. The first video in this series, if you haven't watched, is actually a review of the GF3, which is what I used as the basis for the digital bits of this camera. In this video, we're going to go over a few new developments. To cut to the chase though, for anyone that doesn't want to listen through the details, the D-TLR currently is functioning. The GF3 is the digital back, and it works like an actual TLR. Framing and focusing can be done through the actual top optic, and you can actually do your waist level shooting, or you could also do it through the rear screen like a chunky mirrorless camera. As you can see, the camera isn't that pretty, but it does work. So for anyone that's sticking around and doesn't want to, or does want to go over the long version of this, we're going to go over a couple things. We're going to talk about the issues I overcame since the last video, new issues that I've discovered, and my plan moving forward. Issues that have been overcome. In the last video, I mentioned that the original GF3 that I bought for the project had died. Since then, I have bought another GF3, and that allowed me to figure out what specifically kicked the bucket. It was the main board. Something there did not survive, and that was probably from my own stupidity, as you might remember from the last video. And so with that problem figured out, and with a new main board in place, I was able to continue to do more testing. And this revealed a couple things. The original sensor shutter assembly that I had ended up being actually too high up in the camera body to function and allow it to focus to infinity. So in order to fix that, I actually ended up removing parts of the assembly that the shutter and the sensor were on, as well as the actual lens contacts. As you can see, this is what I removed from my original assembly. Since we don't need that part anymore, well, initially I thought we might have needed this frame just for the extra rigidity, but I just modeled the screw points onto the plastic frame that I made and removed the electronic contacts for the lenses we're not going to be using. And in doing so, I ended up being able to put the sensor in the right place and get it lined up properly. So this is what the sensor frame and assembly currently looks like. So the shutter is there and the sensor is there, and these are directly mounted onto the plastic frame. It does make it quite a bit thinner, and it allows me to push the sensor into the right spot further into the camera. Now, of course, the plastic frame is not nearly as rigid as this metal jobby, but it seems to do a pretty good job either way. The sensor seems to be fairly well aligned and is pretty parallel with where it should be. So the result of the sensor being more or less where it's supposed to be is that I no longer need to stop down to f8 or f16 to achieve infinity focus. Now I can actually do that wide open. So yeah, pretty good. So you may have noticed that there are a couple more bits and bobs attached to the camera. So I essentially ended up using the GF3 top panel from the original body. I did cut it apart just to mainly keep where the buttons were mounted. I didn't need anything else, didn't need the flash. And then, yeah, I just mounted that onto the back of the D-TLR. So the shutter button is right there. So it allowed me to, not have to do the work of modeling new buttons. I figured, you don't have to do extra work if you can just use the things that are already existing. I also learned from the last video that the GF3 will not run with just the plus and minus terminals connected on the battery. The two other terminals in the middle must be connected as well. I assumed that the GF3 might just assume that it was on DC power using like a dummy battery or something. But as soon as you connect the batteries with just the plus minus terminal, the camera could tell, and it just told me, turn it off and switch batteries to one that isn't messed up. As a result, I ended up wiring up the additional two terminals to the battery pack. And yeah, it works fine now. It was just a little more work than I wanted to do. Additionally, you might have noticed the rear LCD is also mounted onto this camera. So if I do get tired of using it as a TLR, I can use it, as I said, as a regular mirrorless camera-ish, kind of, and compose using the rear screen. That being said, the TLR is kind of why I built it, so yeah, good stuff. And I know what you're thinking. Why would you bother using the rear LCD anyways? Well, this particular TLR doesn't have a particularly bright finder, and I find that using it in a really sunny day with the light shining directly down can get a bit dicey. So there are probably times where I'm gonna want to compose on the rear, just because it's difficult to compose using the top bits. So the next thing I managed to do was I actually managed to fix the battery in place. You might have noticed there is a battery door here. And yeah, that's actually holding the battery down. And you might have also noticed on the front, it is held closed via paper clips. So, it's a bit janky, but overall it works. And considering that I think the lack of battery door was what helped me murder the first GF3, this is overall a win. So turning to the back of the camera, you can see there is some felt padding that has been put in the camera and on the bottom and on the sides. I've basically attempted to do some light sealing. It seems that it's actually working out pretty well, which is a little unfortunate because I actually did kind of like some of the mild light leaks. So I didn't actually permanently affix this stuff. If I want to, say, activate a light leak filter, I will then just pull this back and the sensor is right there, and we will have a intentionally reduced or intentionally introduced light leak. But for now, it is folded over and generally actually keeps stray light from entering and interfering with the picture taking. It was way more effective than I thought it would be. I was walking around in bright daytime, taking shots, and the camera actually did not exhibit leakage. So another win. So with the sensor position now more in line with where it's supposed to be, when I was using the camera initially, I realized that I still would have to tune the focusing to match it exactly with where the sensor was. And this is actually kind of not too bad to do. I imagine it's harder to do, or would have been harder to do back in ye filmy days when you had to actually match these without live view. But I managed to adjust the position of this top element to match the difference in distance from the actual sensor to the bottom element. And again, really easy to do with a live view because I basically set this thing on a table, pointed it out a window, set it to infinity on the rear LCD, and from there, you can actually rotate the front, you can loosen the front element using this silver bit there. You can unscrew it, and then from there, you can either move up or move in the top element until the image from the ground glass roughly is in focus and matches the image on the rear LCD. And in doing that, I was able to get the TLR top optic to match with the bottom half of the camera. And so yeah, like I said, focusing is now pretty spot on. And yeah, it works like a TLR. The other thing that I had to do was, because the sensor is so much smaller than the actual 6x6 film that's normally on there, I had to actually mask off parts of the ground glass to remind myself where I need to frame things. It's kind of annoying because the amount of image is very small. So you can see there are 2 green lines. That's just telling me where vertically like my scene is covered, or how much horizontal scene is covered. And then you can see the hash marks are where the vertical bits end. For the green, that's at the closest focusing distance, and the black is at infinity, since there is some parallax to account for. What are the next steps for this project? Well, to be honest, for the most part, functionally, it's good to go. But I am debating trying to do a bit more beautification. This is pretty ugly. And possibly I might do something about improving the ergonomics. It is not the most comfortable thing to hold. I'm also debating whether or not I want to find a spot to remount and install the microphone that was built into the GF3. I initially took it off the top plate and just left it off because I'm pretty sure I wasn't going to shoot any video, and if I was, I normally would just mute it anyways. But yeah, so that's a thing that I'm considering doing. Another thing that I am kind of considering as a next step is to find a way to increase the magnification on the TLR top-down bits. This one built in is okay, but really it's not quite enough. And especially when you consider how much cropping I'm doing to the frame there. But aside from that, yeah, I think otherwise there's not that much more to do on this camera, other than maybe review it later. Conclusion. So this may or may not be the end of the series. As I just said, we might do a review of this camera. I might be a tiny bit biased since I did make it. But yeah, the project itself was a ton of fun. Even though I broke a GF3 mainboard, I'll say that, the whole process of just understanding what I needed to do and conceptually doing it, overall, a lot of good times had. It was more difficult than my other projects, like the adapting things to making the digital rangefinder and putting digital backs on, field cameras, that kind of dealy. For this one, it just felt like there was more flying by the seat of my pants. Like I couldn't plan too many things ahead until I had built it to test it, or I couldn't plan to do too many things, so I took things apart and actually had to look at the space I had to work with. So overall, the result of me being lazy and just doing things as they came, the whole project just kind of isn't that coherent, and you get things that are just glued in place and felt all around. It's just not a particularly coherent project. But otherwise, I'm thinking that I might want to do a similar project to a rangefinder, but this time take a instead of using the rangefinder body, just design my own and use the finder itself. I don't know. I'm still kind of going over the details. Probably will still use the GF3 as a base just because I'm now really used to taking that thing apart. I must have, for this particular build, disassembled and reconnected the sensor mainboard, shutter, buttons like 10, 20, 30 times. So I'm now very familiar with the Panasonic GF3 and pretty happy to be able to rapidly disassemble, reassemble bits as I need. Anyways, let me know down below if you think I should digitize another camera. As I said, I am thinking about doing a 35mm rangefinder, but otherwise, that's all I got. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe a super thanks, especially for these kinds of videos, as apparently I'm good at breaking things and costs money to replace the things that I broke. But otherwise, till next time, bye.